I was able to recently scale this jewelry e-commerce brand right here to $2,493 per day in revenue exclusively using Google Ads. And in this video, I want to show you exactly how we made this happen. Now, this is actually a very interesting case study, even for me personally, because this entire brand, including the advertising, whether it be Google Ads or Facebook Ads, is done in only one European country, which is Italy. So despite targeting one specific country with a limited amount of overall population for this individual niche, although it's a jewelry brand, there's a very large audience nonetheless. But even in that situation, they were able to achieve such great results, not only with Google Ads, but in general for their business, which makes it very unique because so many e-commerce brands out there believe that the only way to truly scale their e-commerce brands is by targeting one of the top 5 big countries. And this brand kind of goes against it. But before we actually deep dive into the actual strategy, how we made all of this happen, let's take a step back and actually understand this brand on a very broad fundamental level. So this is a jewelry brand very similar to this brand right here, which is Gorjana, which is based here in the United States. However, the overall approach in terms of the website feel, the overall collection, sub-collections, etc., very similar to the Italian brand which we are currently working with. They even sell some in things which are actually real gold as well. Because of this, their overall average order value ranges anywhere from 41 euros on the lower end, which by the way, all these numbers are in euros, to over 200 to 300 euros on the higher end. So this average order value can fluctuate because the accessories that they sell also fluctuates in terms of pricing. Now, in terms of the actual business numbers, as you can see here, we've been able to achieve in the period from June 6th to June 25th, because earlier before June 6th is when we actually began work earlier in the month of June. And during this time period, we've been able to almost scale at a 3x ROAS, which is exactly what the client was expecting. This is a client under my Google Ads agency, Euro Marketing. But one of the major issues they've had from the start was number one, improper conversion tracking, but also number two, a lack of consistency in terms of the overall return on ad spend. Now, during this time, if we kind of look at a deeper level and a bigger level, we can understand that overall the business has been fairly consistent throughout this time period. However, the ROAS has always kind of hovered around a 2x to maybe even a 3x on a higher end. And this is that too with improper conversion tracking. So a lot of these numbers you see right here, this 3.23x ROAS during this time, it was actually overinflated, and it's about the real numbers for about half of what we saw during the earlier portions of the year, until eventually they ended up fixing it late in middle of May. But this was kind of the overall situation of the account when we first began work, when we first started auditing this e-commerce brand. Well, now, one of the main concerns which this brand owner, which a lot of brand owners out there actually have as well, was the brand had completely plateaued when it came to Google Ads. I mean, if we look at it on a week-to-week level, we can see that overall in terms of the ROAS, things were pretty much the same. Even if we look at the conversion value, things were not really moving in any proper direction that they would have wanted it to move. And this was obviously a little bit of a cause of concern for this brand, because their main goal was to not just rely on Facebook ads, TikTok ads, because costs were very quickly ramping up even in the Italian market as competitors were starting to notice these ads, because this is a semi dropshipping store which was later turned into a real branded store. But other brands were starting to copy their overall approaches when it came to Facebook and TikTok ads, which is one of the main reasons they actually started going on Google Ads and actually being very, very active on it during the earlier portions of 2024. So around February, March, and April is when they actually got onto Google Ads and actually started to ramp up all of the work that was getting done on the Google Ads side of things. And now, as we entered the actual brand, what we realized was the 3x goal with realistic conversion values and realistic numbers here was the goal. What we wanted to essentially do was figure out a way to kind of go over this plateau which this brand faced after basically December of 2024 and going into March, April, May, which is not technically their better months. However, it still does fairly decent during these time periods, especially in July when it's actually the peak season for this time before, again, Q4. But essentially what we wanted to do when we entered this brand during the early portion of June was to come in with a strategy that did not really kind of change a lot of the things in terms of the campaigns that were already running. Because one thing we quickly realized when we did a complete audit of this account was a lot of these campaigns which were originally running had been running for many weeks and even many months. And it doesn't matter what niche or industry your brand is in, is to come into a brand or a Google Ads account and and basically shut off anything that's been working for a prolonged period of time like this. So keeping that in mind, what we had to essentially do was we had to essentially start from the foundation up, which meant, of course, focusing on the product feed, the conversion tracking, which is one of the first things we fixed. But when we did a bit of research into the Italian market, so for example, if we go on over to isearchfrom.com and look at the Italian market itself and actually search up one of their major keywords for one of their major products, what we can understand is overall, this niche had a lot of specific competitors which had very similar approaches to each other. So these are the kind of overall competitors we were dealing with, very similar to each other. And our main goal was to dominate the market and dominate the search listings and the shopping listings which were coming up. So to do this, we had to start from the product feed by analyzing what the competitors in this market, in this industry and country were doing. Now, one of the first things we noticed was a lot of these competitors had plain, simple, white background images. There were very few which were actually taking the step of actually having something in the background, such as real lifestyle images or maybe just a different color for the background itself. So this is kind of the first things we implemented within the brand we were working with, which was to go in and make the product feed in terms of the product image a bit better to be the opposite of our competitors. Now, it doesn't matter what year we go or how many new competitors come in, doing the opposite of your competitors almost always works with Google Ads. This could be as simple as if you see a lot of these, for example, rings pointed from left to right, you need to come in and you need to make your ring point from right to left, or maybe lay it down on the ground, or maybe turn it upside down. Whatever it may be, it's doing the opposite of the competitor. But the same thing could be done with the product titles. For instance, if you notice a lot of your competitors have smaller product titles, you can come in with a very big product title that's maybe in some situations capitalized to actually grab somebody's attention at a much better level. Or you could also be doing things such as having reviews if nobody has reviews, or not having reviews if a lot of your competitors have reviews. These are just basic things we look for when we're analyzing the product feed, when we're trying to figure out different ways to make it better. So once the product feed and the conversion tracking side of things was out of the way, the next approach we took was not actually with the campaigns directly. Instead, we dug deep into the insight section to figure out and use a lot of the old data which this brand had already spent a decent amount of money on. So all we did is we looked deep within the last 28 days to understand, number one, which keywords were actually ranking properly and had high CTRs, high conversion rates, but also number two, which were converting the most. The most important thing you can do at any point of time is to look through this list to understand which keywords are ideal with high search volume and which have a decent amount of traction. So the first thing I always do is click the details section within the inside section to dig deeper in terms of CTRs, conversion rates, because the last page, the insights page itself, although it does have important information, it's very basic, it's very broad. We want to go a bit deeper to understand which keywords that we can sprinkle within our product titles and descriptions, which was basically the second step we took here once the product feed was properly optimized. The last thing you want to do is just go after brand new data, brand new campaigns when you already have so much data from over a year, at least in this account, to work with. So same thing can be done for your brand. Same thing is what we do for so many brands which we work with, which, by the way, if you run a brand doing $50,000 or more per month in revenue, you need some extra help scaling to the next level with Google Ads, go out to my website, yourmarketing.com, schedule a completely free call with me, and let's see how we can potentially work together and make that happen. But once the cleanup process was essentially done, working from the foundation up, ensuring all of the campaigns were cleaned up, ensuring the inside section was properly looked into, the main goal now was to go into the already existing campaigns, which, by the way, this approach itself, it was not a bad approach, but number one, there was just too much going on, like I often see with 95% of the brand, which we end up auditing. But number two, there was a lot of overlap getting caused because of this approach. So what they had going on during this time was that one major performance max came in with one major standard shopping campaign that was there to test all of the products. Now, both of these campaigns had the same exact products during the initial period, simply because what they were doing was they were essentially trying to figure out which campaign works better in terms of the ROAS, in terms of the overall revenue, so on and so forth. So during the time they were handling the accounts, the overall account was running at a 2.04x ROAS at 25,000 euros in total revenue for this campaign, although again, conversion tracking was not the most accurate during this time, so it was a bit lower. And the standard shopping was actually doing better, but it was barely spending any money. And all of the other campaigns here in terms of performance max campaigns all they had going on was just product segregation based on collections. So some of these collections, sub-collections, which were doing well within the original testing campaigns, they were running now externally within their own approaches, within their own campaigns. And beyond that, what they had going on was just a search campaign for general search keywords, which were cold traffic search keywords, and then a branded campaign for some of their major keywords. But once we came into the account, we analyzed all of the campaigns that were running well. We wanted to kind of change things up a bit because we noticed the campaigns which were doing well were not getting as much love as they should be in order to scale it further. So the first thing we did is we actually started spending a bit more money on the standard shopping campaign. So that spend alone went up, and it started to match a little bit more for the performance max campaign side of things. The ROAS has stayed steady, but now also the other thing we did was we improved the performance max campaign ROAS drastically by going after cold traffic, by also cleaning it up significantly. This is where so many brands leave so much money on the table. They just focus on the top level metrics like CTRs, CPCs, but they don't actually actively go inside the campaigns to look into which asset groups are doing well, which asset groups are not doing well, and they don't do anything such as A/B testing within the asset group. So if you see right here, we have a total of 5 different asset groups running, all targeting specific subcategories, sub-collections under a main collection. So all we're trying to do is A/B test amongst all of these to figure out what is the best approach, what the algorithm prefers more. And all we do is every 30 days, we come in here to look at which brand or which asset group specifically have better ROAS, which don't have better ROAS, and we shut them down on a 30-day period every 30 days. But in addition, one of the major things we did was we came in here to figure out which products had high ad spend but low return on ad spend for them. And we started to get rid of them completely within their own separate campaigns. This is what I call the losers campaigns, where all of the bad products with low ROAS values and so forth, they get placed in their own losers campaign to get tested separately. But in addition, we analyzed which products had lower CTRs, which products were not getting tested, because in total, this campaign was testing roughly 3,783 SKUs. And this meant a lot of the SKUs in here were not getting tested properly. As you see right here, a lot of them had €0 in ad spend. So these are the things which we kind of focus more on, not just for this campaign, but basically for all of the campaigns. Just campaign cleanup from the products to the bad keywords, just giving them their own avenue, all the bad products, and leaving the products which are untested exactly where they are within that original campaign to get tested properly. Also keeping it in the original campaign while segregating out what needs to be tested further within these other performance max campaigns and whatnot. But very simple approach. As you can see, it's not about adding more always. Oftentimes, 90% of the time even, it's more about cleaning up what you already have and making things better in that sense, to allow the algorithm to focus more on what's already working or give time to what has not been tested properly to then they get tested properly. But this is eventually now bringing us to the scaling phase, which in this situation, there could have been 2 ways we could have scaled this. Vertical scaling is the first, where we scale by adding more budgets. Horizontal scaling is the second, where we scale by adding more campaign types. Now, because we already have 10 campaigns running at this point of time, we are not going to be adding any more campaigns for the time being, because so that means horizontal scaling is out of the picture. What we are now doing is vertical scaling. So a lot of these budgets, as you can see, some of them are limited by target, but most of them can be scaled further. So what we are doing now is every 14 to 30 days increasing the budgets while ensuring we remain around a 3x ROAS, because for this brand, a 3x ROAS is the ideal target that it wants to scale at, which is exactly what we want to go after. If your brand does not operate at a 3x ROAS, obviously you want to increase the ROAS or go after the ROAS that you want to achieve first before you even think about scaling, which is exactly what we did here. So to kind of recap the entire process, we started work from the foundation like we always do, because if you don't have a strong foundation, it becomes very difficult to scale the brand long term. Once your foundation is in place, step 2 is not about doing more stuff within the campaigns, not about launching stuff, not about even shutting things off. Rather, it's about digging deep into what you already have running to understand what can run better in terms of the insight section and making your back end, your product feed, and so on and so forth much better, because that brings you to step 3, which is then actually dealing with the campaigns, looking at what needs to be removed, giving it its own avenue of growth. And normally when it comes to product segregation nowadays, what I see works the best is product segregation based on past data, winners versus losers, or just segregation based on the product prices or margins. These are the three major avenues you should be going after when it comes to segregation. But then that brings us to step 4, which is actually scaling the campaigns, going further in terms of budgets, going further in terms of data restriction, decreasing them if needed, and then horizontal scaling as needed. Again, if you run a brand doing $50,000 or more per month in revenue, you want to scale to the very next level with Google Ads, go out to my website, yourmarketing.com, schedule a completely free call with me, and let's see how we can potentially work together and make that happen.